Welcome to Still Untitled, the Adam Savage Project. I'm Will.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Norm.
And we have a special guest, Ian Cole.
Hi, Ian. It's good to meet you.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Ian is one of my fellow board members on Nation of Makers, but he's also the co-founder of the Maker Effect Foundation out of Orlando. And if you've ever been to a makerspace in Orlando, I believe you've touched some of his work. Is that reasonable to say?
I like hanging out in makerspaces, and helping organize them is something that is very rewarding. So
he's a connector. Maker Effect Foundation is effectively a very similar organization to what Nation of Makers hopes to be on a similar but larger scale.
Yeah, we really started in Central Florida and seeing the opportunity to take the skills that we had and help the makerspaces to grow and work together in a very sort of collaborative way. We started producing the Maker Faire there, and that led to us being in that sort of connector role and knowing everyone, and one thing led to another.
Organizationally, for Nation of Makers, since you're based in Florida and your network of makerspaces there, I'm sure has its own distinct culture. Is it that the board is kind of spread geographically around to bring what works in those parts geographically?
Yeah, so when Nation of Makers was being formed late last year, there was thought to sort of geographic diversity. There was also thought to the type of spaces, and for example, Harley, who's the co-founder of Burning Man, is also on the board, and I think that really brings just yet another dynamic to it. People tend to think of makerspaces as being a lot of times sort of purely electronics or purely laser cutters, and while that's maybe core, I love when people come into our space and they're like, there's so much art, and you go, yeah, that's kind of the point. Art is making too.
And one of the things that drives me crazy about visiting makerspaces is they're often quite pristine. And I don't see enough shit on the walls. And I keep on advocating, like, you guys need to take 7 iterations of a project and put them all up in a row, on the right?
Absolutely.
But I visited a space called Insight Focus in Detroit just last week. Again, every time you visit a makerspace, it's like a whole other philosophy about what's possible. Insight Focus is geared towards getting people in Detroit who need housing to put in sweat equity and build houses out of the makerspace. They're using a ShopBot to basically groove studs to build inexpensive small houses to code, working with the city of Detroit.
Wow.
Who's giving them hundreds of acres in the middle of the city to develop sustainable housing that's being built by its residents.
That's amazing. You need to go to NYC Resistor sometime, Adam, because Norm and I went there years. It was one of the first makerspaces we went to, and it is. Trust me, you'll feel right at home. It is dense and rich, and like it has the detritus of 1,000 in progress projects kind of strewn throughout.
Yeah, I think a lot of times the amount of stuff on the wall is also often related to how long the space has been together.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
There's sort of it ends up being almost a historian function to use the walls to show those things. And
well, so this one plan, I've been meaning to talk to you about this, Norm, is that I wanted to go, and you know how like you go to those restaurants in LA and there's all the pictures of the famous people on the walls? I thought I should never again visit a makerspace without bringing a picture. But I don't want to bring a hey, Adam Savage was here. So we should take a picture of me like actively screwing something up with my hair messy and my face dirty, of like, it's not glamorous, right?
Or make something
some
to bring there.
Or make something and bring it, yes. Yeah. Something to put on the walls, because they need to, I gain energy from chaos.
Yeah, and it's not only reflective of the people who've come and gone in history, but also how the tools have changed. And you can say things 10 years ago were mostly not made with the CNC machines we have now, and laser cutters, and the rapid prototyping machines.
So kind of riffing off that idea of bringing the photo's neat, but what if you sort of carried a number of small, very strange parts?
Yep.
And you left behind, like I think of some of the amazing salvage places I've been, and you find these like really cool bits, and if you just kind of pin that thing to the wall with maybe a little bit of history of what it was.
The belt punches. Right?
Yeah. Well, and I actually have a collection here and there in these cases. I'm trying to see if I can see one right now. I love buying tools that have clearly they were used to do something, but what they were meant for is a mystery.
Well, that was always my favorite part of Cooks Illustrated. At the end of the magazine every month, they have a random piece of culinary equipment from throughout time. Amazing. They put it in there because nobody in the office full of these smart cooking people with thousands and thousands and thousands of cooking books on hand. Right. They don't know what it is. They post
Right.
it, and then people figure it out, and it turns out 3 years later you can buy it at Williams-Sonoma.
Yeah.
There's a whole subreddit for taking pictures of things and saying, "What the hell is it?"
I don't know about that one.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
and I'm
I
totally
thought Things
spacing
Cut in
on the
Half
name.
was my favorite subreddit, but this
that's
might
a good
be-
one. That is a very good one.
So speaking of bringing people around from all over the world into makerspaces and connecting people, this weekend in San Francisco was Bay Area Maker Faire.
The big one.
It is
The mothership.
The mothership.
Yes.
I have long said it is my favorite weekend of the year. That has only become more true as I now have a 4-year-old kid who I can bring and kind of see that thing through
See
her
through
eyes.
their eyes. Yeah.
But it's always exceptional, and I'm sure you're in town partly for that, among other things.
I am.
And I think we should talk about Maker Faire because
Yep.
we haven't talked about this stuff, and we don't talk about this enough, and it's important.
Yeah. And we're most familiar, of course, with the Bay Area Maker Faire.
Sure.
It's a talk, a sermon every year. We'll have that video on the site. It might be up on the site right now. But
He was preaching yesterday.
Yeah, it
it
was
was good.
preaching.
Yeah.
Preaching
What,
the
what, did,
makers.
what did you write out? I discovered this year that the best time to see the crowded parts of Maker Faire are when you're talking. Because we were walking around yesterday. My wife was like, "Where the hell did everybody go? There's nobody in the dark room. There's
yeah.
nobody in the So
along those lines, I ran into Rodney Brooks last year from MIT, and he said, I can't do his accent, but his charming Australian accent. And he said, you gave me the worst public speaking experience I've ever had. And I was like, why? And he's like, I followed you at Maker Faire years ago and watched this room empty out. I'm sorry, Rodney. So I gave a sermon yesterday, and I wrote out, have you ever seen that giant, the French group that makes the giant puppets, the marionette little girl that's like 30 feet high and operated from cranes?
Spiders, the elephants.
Those guys had this giant ant the size of a Volvo
Lay
station
machine.
wagon.
Yes,
made out of wood.
Yeah.
What's that?
Lay machine.
Lay machine.
Yes.
Oh my God, this thing was so beautiful. And I'm operating the front legs, which have 6 layers of movement built into them just from bicycle handles. And that's just the 2 front legs, and the thing drives.
It's mechanical art. I
and
mean,
it's all
just
human
amazing.
powered. That is incredible.
Yeah, totally amazing. So that's what I wrote in on.
I was making balloon animals.
I was trying to think, how do they bring that over here? Because I've seen
Some
photos of
big
them all over
container.
Europe.
Yeah.
It's a big shipping container
Yeah.
and then
This-
reassembled.
And
Yeah,
then
there's
this
a pod-
it's got to leave 3 months ago.
Oh,
There's a
wow,
podcast
yeah.
about that, actually, Norm.
Yeah, it's shipping. Yeah, for shipping. They have actually a great art book they had there with sketches, because to get to that stage, it's dozens and dozens of different mechanical sketches.
And I was fascinated that the legs, which are literally made of wood, carved out of wood with metal infrastructure, endoskeleton, I was like, how are they making these neutrally balanced? And it's big weights on the other end. Giant stacks of half-inch plates of steel with an eye bolt through it, painted black, just at the other end of the leg, and everything's balanced.
Does this move the same way that the Strongby? I mean, obviously it's a different movement, but is it the same kind of
No,
hypnotic
the
movement?
legs are not the motivation.
Okay.
The legs are being puppeted, and there is, I think, a wheeled motivation underneath.
Okay, that's incredible.
Fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely gorgeous. Those guys, they have an entire facility where they do their performances and they build these things. And I met the 2 guys yesterday. Not for the last time. I want to go to
You
France.
wanna go?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
My wife laughs at me because my sort of vacation list is not your typical tourist vacation list, right? I want to go to all the places where things are made, and that definitely hit my radar last year when I saw that.
Well, and they made a baby elephant costume that is a single person operates it. And weirdly, I didn't know about that, but I've been working on a baby elephant costume for
Of course
Brain
you have.
Candy because I love
Of course you
elephants.
have.
Right. Yeah. And my drawing is very similar to their construction. I mean, it's, obviously there's not a lot of ways to skin this cat. But I showed Francois, the guy, one of the two guys who founded La Machine, my sketch, and he laughed because it's like, oh yeah, no, this is exactly what we're doing all day long, every day. And it's like, I can't wait to sink my teeth into more of their work.
Oh, that's so cool. So Norm, I'd say you guys, you and Norm probably spent more time walking around, chasing 4-year-olds, talking to people, and then not being able to walk around in the crowd so much. What was the best stuff? What got you the most excited? And my favorite thing is walking around and kind of getting inspiration from other people and seeing the projects that they're doing and how they're putting that stuff together. I'm curious what you guys liked.
I view Maker Faire now from two lenses. We're the entity that produces Maker Faire Orlando, so I'm looking at everything from the signage to potential content that we could invite to, production value. How do they do it? The other side of me is still geeking out and, thinking about how, how is it made and the joy of creation. One of the things I loved, and it's very straightforward, but there's a group that takes pinball assemblies. I love pinball machines, and they take pinball assemblies and they basically put them on small mounted pieces and show you how a pop bumper works or how a flipper works, and they turn them into all these little interactive, and they must have 30 or 40 of them, and so it's a really interesting hands-on way to get kids excited about pinball when most kids see a pinball machine today and they're like, but sort of showing them how they had a pop bumper that not only worked at full speed, but then the one next to it had the ball on a rod and was sort of animating how it worked in slow motion. Yeah. And I've got some friends back in Orlando that run a local pinball and arcade show, and so I was sending them photos like, we've got to build these.
We know some people. Were you in town? Did you go to the Pinagogo?
I did not.
Okay.
They were like, you've got to, and I couldn't make the scheduling work.
Yeah, big pinball convention in Dixon.
Yeah.
Years and years ago, I did a lot of sculpture with piano mechanics, the mechanics from pianos, and I have a few left over from those days. But the very first one I was given was by Bosendorfer Piano, gave me the mechanics of this little piano to make a sculpture for them out of. And the first thing I did with this, I cut the end and I made a mechanic of a single hammer assembly and how it works. It's in the cabinet over there. Yeah. We'll take some pictures of it. But it's exactly the same thing. It's like when you actually see how a piano key works, and you can't believe that this amazing music comes out of such a simple arrangement of dowels and felt and wooden chunks.
Go ahead. I was going to say, this year in the dark room, they had a baby grand piano that was, I think it was all acrylic, it was transparent, and it wasn't an actual baby grand piano though. It was a synth hooked up to a bunch of Arduinos and light controllers that were firing a string worth of lights on each note that you played. So when somebody sat down and actually played, it was this dancing light sculpture that was happening inside a piano. It was absolutely gorgeous.
Amazing.
I just want to move into the dark room for the weekend. It's cool. It's beautiful. There's lights everywhere.
It's not as loud as it used to be, which was really nice.
No Tesla coils.
The Tesla coils. I missed the Tesla coils, but also it was nice to be in the inside forest.
Did you see the giant Tesla coils that were there?
Did they fire? They fired them. I assume.
They were.
Was that Greg Lay doing those?
I don't remember the name, but they were built for Burning Man, and what he explained is that normally Tesla coils are designed to be grounded, and this design is specifically made so he can roll in, set it up anywhere, and not have to have that deep-driven earth ground. But they've got to be
They were 30 feet high. Yeah,
they're massive.
Crazy. Was there something specific at Maker Faire that stood out for you?
I'm really interested in mobile maker spaces right now. So we've got some great spaces in Orlando if people will come to the space. Yep. And I think the next phase for us, from an outreach, especially from a getting out to neighborhoods where they can't come to us, is going to be a mobile maker space. And I think it was the San Jose Library had this fantastic space, and the woman who ran it was just super helpful in explaining their philosophies and how they built it. It's really neat.
Norm, you and I talked to some folks years ago who run a bicycle company. They make carbon fiber bicycles out of Santa Cruz, and then a couple months a year they ship mobile maker spaces in shipping containers. And they basically bring, like, it's the bicycle equivalent of the hardware burrito for a rep wrap, but they ship enough of those that they can make hundreds of bikes, and they bring a flat table and all the epoxy and the bike hardware they need, and then they take bamboo and I think baobab bark that they wrap that they use in place of. So they normally make carbon fiber bikes, and they use the tree bark with the epoxy to make the bamboo bikes, and they're these incredibly high end bikes. And they're perfectly true and all. Like, it was really fascinating, and they did it all out of like 2 shipping containers or something like that, and spend 2 months building, but teaching people how to build bikes and then leave the hardware behind when they're done.
Yeah, I think when you can leave a skill, and that I think that's a lot of what happens in the maker community is we're giving people these little intro experiences that let them, whether it's learn to solder or teach them how to make a T-shirt or whatnot. You just kind of get them started. You give them enough. You teach them that they can, and then they go from there.
Yeah, some of the more spectacular things. They're in the big expo hall. There's a guy, Harrell, who replicates engines with 3D designs. So he brought his completely 1/3 scale working engines.
Wow.
Not completely working.
3D
They are tied
printed?
to 3D, all 3D printed. 95% with some minor
Files
hardware.
online.
All the files are public.
Yep.
And
Oh, that's awesome.
He's done like
Little valves.
half a dozen of them, and then he's also done a transmission, which he said he did because you can't explain
Right.
how a transmission works. You have to see it.
Yeah.
And so it's all cutaways.
Oh my gosh.
A tiny shifter, and you
Yeah.
can see it all work.
Do you remember the guy who did that beautiful 3D printed jet engine that
Yeah.
had all the that stuff? Just I want it. I want to eat it. It's like it's so exciting.
Well, it's like
to
growing
see it.
up, and you see you get the cutaway models that you can buy and
Yeah.
put together. But this is a functional version that you can download a file for free and print at home. And with an FDM printer, you get for $400, you have the tolerances to make something work.
That's incredible. I spent some time with the new version of the Open ROV.
Oh yeah,
which
that
is
is beautiful,
which is
James Bond looking
Oh my
thing.
god! It's like they were letting kids fly it, or pilot it. So
Yeah.
we sat down and took a try. And,
How is it for driving?
well, you'd have to ask my daughter. She did most of the driving, but she picked it up. Like she drives RC cars around the house,
Yeah.
and she picked it up really quickly. Which
sign.
is, but it's way faster than the last one, so they can take it places where there's current that would have precluded the earlier ones from going. I think it's like a couple meters a second or something.
Nice.
So I
And
was
they have it now
surprised.
tethered to a buoy, so you get wireless signal from
Yeah.
the buoy to your controller.
Still 100 meters depth, but it was really nice. I was really shocked at the video quality they were getting out of it and stuff like that. It's really cool.
Did you see the Maslow CNC?
Yes,
No.
so we actually had them here. They were set
Okay.
up in our studio last week. These small company, Bar Smith over in Portland, designed a CNC, which he got the idea from going to Maker Faire, just chatting with someone, and someone said, "Why can't I do an upright CNC?" And he said, "Oh, I think I could probably do that." His first project was a desktop one, and so he has a kit you can buy for $350.
What is it?
It's basically think of it like an easel, and you can put a 4x8 on there, and then with
A sheet of plywood.
a sheet of plywood, full sheet of plywood, 3/4 inch, and then you have a chain system basically triangulates your carriage and put a router, and you can
it's like a
route.
draw
So it's like
bot.
a slide.
It's like a draw
Oh
bot.
wow, that's amazing! But it has a router on it.
But it has a router.
router.
And,
It's so
and the
smart.
the best part is the weights
Yeah.
are 2 bricks.
Yeah,
Of course,
you bring your own bricks.
that
They
makes
don't ship
perfect
the
sense.
bricks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
We were discussing this with we sent some photos back to some folks at our makerspace, and somebody immediately chimed in and said, "I got the bricks." Thanks, guys.
Hey, it takes a village.
There was
Yeah, it does.
I finally, I've always seen the people making the giant bubbles there for years and years and years, and of course, small kid, it's like crack for a small child. We got out, and I was talking to one of the people who made it because we wanted to bring that technology home, and it turns out that all of the information about the bubble makers is on a wikia, and it's all open source CNC, like Creative Commons. So basically, they tell you everything from like the right mop head to buy, and then how to pull the nylon core out of the rope so it holds more bubbles. And like, it was just it's the simplest little thing, but like the fact that people are so open and sharing with the information that they've managed to gather is one of my favorite things about the whole weekend.
I totally agree.
It's really good.
That is obviously my favorite too.
Yeah.
The sharing of the information and those tiny little pieces of institutional knowledge which radically improve your experience.
Well, and I think the thing about Bay Area, New York, especially because they draw people from all over, is you have this sort of big, exciting weekend, but now all that information disseminates back to all the places, and then we'll end up back at the local maker fairs, and it's just really exciting to see it spread.
Does Make have demographic information about who travels in? Because the first couple of years of Maker Faire, it felt more Bay Area.
Well,
but-
certainly is now, with the number of people arriving.
Yeah.
But it was curious to me on that regard to compare Maker Fairs to Comic-Cons. We were thinking along the same lines, I guess, because San Diego Comic-Con, where we've been going for 10 years now, is amazing. But when we went to New York Comic-Con last year for the very first time, I was astonished at the level of diversity of the New York ComicCon put every other con I've ever been to shame. And I'm talking to one of the organizers, they're like, because most of the New York ComicCon is coming from the 5 boroughs. It's coming from one of the most diverse cities in the world, right?
Yeah.
So they have the large number of locals to draw from. And that's great that New York pulls that, but it's quite a unique place. And I was looking around the crowd and thinking about how far and wide this group had come from.
We had the same response when we went to New York Maker Faire the first time. I remember walking around thinking, oh, right, clearly there's a lot more robots here because the East Coast tech schools are all around and people bring their projects.
Right.
And the high schools have programs that associate with those schools. And
I went to Kansas City a few years ago, and one of the things I remember most was they had a local car club that does the sort of hydraulic, bouncing cars all behind. There's Maker Faire, and there's this row of cars going up and down, and my sons and I were like, hydraulics, how does this work? Let's go learn. And so that regional flavor that you get, you don't necessarily get that at Bay Area, New York as much because so many people travel. But when you get down to the smaller featured Maker Fairs and the mini Maker Fairs, you get kind of a lot more sense of what that region makes.
So I did my usual shtick this year, as I gave my Sunday talk at around noon, and I signed autographs for a couple of hours, and it was wonderful. But there was a trend this time. Well, I started a thing where I started asking everyone, what are you making? What are you working on? And, whether you're 8 or 80, the answers were always really interesting.
It's always interesting.
But there was a repeated answer, which upset me, and I really want to drive it home, which was people saying, oh, I don't make anything, I code.
Oh.
And
that counts.
This is what I kept saying.
Yeah.
But I think, I want a T-shirt that says coding is making.
I'll make you that shirt.
Thank you.
All right.
Because we need that. It amazed me that coders can go to maker fairs and still think that they are somehow outside a loop.
Yep.
When they are completely inside the same nucleus that we're all playing around
Most
in.
of those projects have code in them at some point, whether it's mechanical code or electronic code. But to your point, we even see this in Orlando in trying to recruit, independent gamers or whatever, is that they feel like they're outside our circle. And we had that originally with artists. We have a call for makers each year where we say, okay, you may now come and apply. And we would get the question, well, when is your call for artists?
Well,
No, you're makers.
And just to be clear, when you put out the call for makers, if people apply and they get in, are you going to then charge them admittance and stuff like that for booth space and all that?
No, absolutely not. So the general rule for Maker Fairs is if you're just exhibiting, it is free. The event itself pays for the space, and you pay for your exhibit and what you're doing. If you're selling, if you're a commercial maker, then usually there's some low fee, and that's very dependent on the specific fair. And some fairs are free fairs, some are paid. So it just really depends on the market. But generally, no, your person just exhibiting that thing that they made is there for free.
And that's the way it works for this maker for Bay Area and every you if you apply to be a maker and you get in, then it's you have to get there and you have to bring your stuff and you have to make the stuff that you bring, but otherwise you just get a space to show off what cool thing you've built.
You never feel like you're being sold something.
Yeah.
When you're chatting with someone,
Even when you're talking to the, to the people who
and sometimes I want to buy the thing, but no, they're not selling it. They just made the one.
I also want to give a shout out to Del Doherty and Sherry Huss and the whole crew that puts on the Bay Area Maker Faire. I've known Sherry now for a decade, or more than a decade, and her level of calm, given what I know is going through her brain,
She's amazing, blows
my freaking mind. And that whole team, everyone from the people directing traffic to the people making sure the food's moving, and it's just it's the attitude is one of such sunniness and brightness, and it's hot as balls, and
or raining,
and there's tens of thousands of people coming through the gate every hour, and it is just the type of sweet atmosphere that I find really engenders that sort of cross discussion and cross inspiration.
And over the last few years, especially, they've evolved the Bay Area one a lot. So it's much more humane. Like if you went 5 years ago and you found it was really crowded in the inside areas, or it was too loud in the dark space, or they've done it. They made some tough decisions like getting rid of on-site parking and making everybody take shuttles in, which I know had to be I know they had to talk about that stuff at length. They reduced the amount of booth space in the big interior areas so that the aisles are wider and you're not you're no longer feel claustrophobic. And like that stuff isn't easy, I know, and the fact that they did it made it a much better event for everybody. And then they kind of counteracted a lot of the lost space by using the parking lots for tents and more outdoor area. It's really good. It's a phenomenal event, and it's really well run, and those guys do awesome work.
Yeah, they had a great program this year. I don't know if it's the first year, but they had producers from the other regional fairs come in and work as crew.
Oh, that's so smart.
That's genius.
So yeah, and I think it's good because I think there's this really bi-directional learning, which I think feels good for the producers that are from other places because they're picking up things and trying new things. But I think they also bring something back to that crew. And to your point about that calm, I can tell you that what we experience is, we're there for everyone, not just to be entertained. We're not, that is our reward. Most of the producers do this because they get from helping those other people. Yeah. So it really is a great thing. And yeah, you're dealing with issues that come up, but it's a very rewarding thing, and that's why most are doing it. So I think it makes it a little easier to take it in and enjoy it in the moment.
Well, and look, I've run big crews and small crews, and I have no idea how they do what they do. It blows my mind. And we've experienced, you go to San Diego Comic-Con, you deal with one type of organization, and those folks are lovely, and they run it in a specific way, which we've gotten used to, and we know how to work around some of the difficulties of the city and the infrastructure. And then we go to New York, and we find a con that has just a completely other aesthetic to the organization and how things are running, and it's fascinating. It's a fascinating thing to catch the glimpse to the inside of.
It's a different part of design than we usually see, right?
Yes.
Or think about, right?
And a super critical one.
Yeah. Well, cool.
We were going to have a spoiler cast about Guardians of the Galaxy, which Will and I both just watched, but I think we're going to have to do that next week.
Yes, we'll save that. Yes.
Okay.
But, by the way, it was awesome.
Oh, I thought it was terrible.
Oh my goodness.
Are you kidding?
Cliffhanger moments.
Well, I guess we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for stopping by, Ian.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, where can people find out more information if they're listening from the Florida area, Orlando area?
Yeah, so you can catch us at makerfaireorlando.com. If you want to look up the Maker Effect Foundation, we're at themakereffect.org. And then we have a brand new space that we just started there, which is makerfx.org.
I was going to say, I tweeted last night some pictures of like my adventure at Maker Faire this weekend, and a lot of people responded with, I've got to come to San Francisco next year for this. And I said, well, actually, you should go to the Maker Faire website and look, because there are dozens or hundreds of these around the world now.
Hundreds.
Yeah. Like everywhere. There's even one in Oakland in the fall. So like you can,
great.
right.
Yeah.
And they're not small.
No.
That's the sort of humorous part, is there's this definition of mini Maker Faire, but it's only mini because you're comparing against Bay Area, which is 100,000+ people.
And it's not small, and it's not small in scope either.
No.
You're still also going to see mind-blowing constructions that people made one of, or
that won't travel to New York or San Francisco,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
It's like we went to the one in Portland years ago, and we're blown away by what they had at the Science Museum out in Portland. So yeah, everybody should go.
Absolutely.
Find them, take your kids.
Support your local Maker Faire, support your local makers.
And if you make something amazing, consider taking that thing on vacation with you and take it to another place where you haven't been, because we love seeing people from other parts of the country as well.
When I was a younger maker in the early 90s, and I wanted to take stuff out, and we were looking for opportunities, showing in group shows and building galleries to show your work. One of the strangest, most rewarding experiences I had was taking this giant gun I'd built, whose title is literally a work of fiction. Like, it's like a 1,000-word work of fiction is the title of this piece. I'll put it up on the site at some point. And I won second prize at the California State Fair with it.
Nice.
There you go.
I entered it in because there's a thing for local artwork in the State Fair, and that was like my first kind of maker-ish type of fair. Christian Risto, a friend of mine who's a robot builder, had a big claw there, and I had some other friends who were in there. And that was just this tiny little room at the California State Fair. Whereas, each of these Maker Fairs is like hundreds of thousands of square feet and amazing people showing this stuff.
But when you won that was then fuel. right?
Yes.
That was fuel to get you to do the next thing.
Totally. I couldn't believe that such a thing had happened and could go on my resume and was this. Yeah, you're right. It was totally.
And so I think you got a blue ribbon yesterday at Maker Faire.
I did.
And I can tell you the featured fairs, Maker Media also sends us blue ribbons, and that is one of the highlights of my year is going to, those select makers who really did something fantastic. Either they built something fantastic or they interacted in a very fantastic way, and being able to present them that and seeing it hanging there and seeing them on social media, just being able to give them back that little bit and that fuel, and knowing that they're going to take that and then build something even bigger, even more amazing, or collaborate with someone else. It's an amazing thing.
And even if you don't get the blue ribbon, the rest of the people there are enthusiastic. It is the friendliest crowd. I talked to an R2 builder yesterday he'd gone to like comic conventions and Comic Cons and stuff like that with his relatively new R2 unit. His name's, shout out to Manny. Thanks for taking time to play R2 for my daughter. She really had a blast. But he said that what he had seen at Comic Cons, where it's mostly adults who are like, oh, cool, I can take a picture with R2D2, was completely dwarfed by taking R2D2 places where there's 4, 5, 6-year-olds who are like, oh my God, Mom, it's R2D2, and they're so excited they're literally vibrating. So it is a good scene. You don't have to be ashamed of what you do. You can show it off. Somebody there will be excited about it, no matter how weird or esoteric you think the thing that you do is, and you should all go to see it. I think it's... Yeah.
We have this... we have an artist that comes to our event every year. His name's Warren. He goes by Famous After Death. And he... it's a good title, isn't it?
It's pretty good, yeah.
He caught me one day after one of the fairs, and he said, I have to tell you, he says, I do a lot of events. This crowd is different. I'm like, okay, different how? Like, what'd they do?
Yeah.
He says, no. He says, most crowds, he says, I go and they go, oh, that's cool. I get the reference. I get the joke. And he said, this crowd asks me, what paint I used, what paper I used, what's my digital process? Would I show them this? Right. And he's like, I have this great time explaining it to him. And I say, well, the reason we invite you back every year is because you have that conversation and you will, you've inspired others to do what you do, and that's that's what it's about.
It's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming by.
Thanks for having me.
I realized I was driving back and forth to LA a lot lately. We need a sign out. We don't have a sign out. Most podcasts have they say stay spicy, or there's some sort of that was a bad. Well, it's I don't want to.
That's the Spice Girls podcast, right?
It's just three of the five.
Going to show up on the Spice
she's not
going to
do that.
We could say stay curious. I've been saying that.
That's
for a
pretty
million
good.
years.
Yeah,
okay.
okay.
Always be making.
Yeah, always be making. That's a good one.
Make stuff.
Okay. Well, you guys let us know what you think. We'll see you all next week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.